Hola, it is Joe Partavila, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Forbes Books Radio. You know, I get press releases and pitches all the time, so after a while I feel some PR fatigue. But every once in a while, one of them catches my eye, like this one. It says there's a new application that one day will be as commonplace on your cell phone as Facebook, LinkedIn, or Uber. It's called Grata, and it launches today, September 9th, 2020. And joining me is the company's founder and CEO, Mark Bunting. Hey there, Mark.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me.
So no pressure, but that press release makes bold claims. What is Grata?
Well, first of all, the name Grata, G-R-A-T-A, it's a riff on the word gratitude. And it really is the core of what we do. It's all about giving praise and recognition really for a job well done, all the way down to our logo and iconography of a gold medal and a blue ribbon and a chevron shape. It's all about recognizing and praising achievement of human beings in the workforce.
Okay. So how does it help those people in the workforce?
Let me just give you sort of a basic sort of foundation comparison. You know, you and I work in a white collar world where we have an ecosystem where we have a professional community, largely on LinkedIn, where we have a full documented history of our great deeds, the wonderful things that we do at work, our peers, our customers, even our prospective next employers. But we don't extend the same opportunity to the 80 million working class individuals, those frontline people that on the heels of COVID, now all of a sudden we appreciate and recognize, and shame on us for not doing it before. But there is no closed ecosystem. There is no platform by which your barista, the people that are changing tires on your car, washing your dog, or serving your food, have an opportunity to harvest, or if you will, memorialize all the great deeds that they do every day. So Grata is a lot like a LinkedIn for the blue collar working class folks in this company. And we've created a mechanism so that in a seamless, easy way, you can reward and recognize the people that do great things every single day.
Wow, that sounds really cool. So can you explain how the app actually works?
This is a mechanism that we're all very familiar with. Think for a moment about the experience you have when you exit an Uber. You can give somebody a 5-star rating. You can say something nice, freehand, and then you have an optional tip. Those 3 steps: 5-star rating, say something nice, optional tip. Why is that limited to a few 100,000 Uber drivers around the country? What about the other hardworking people? They're doing great things every day. And so what we really did is a mashup. We took that Uber exit-like experience and created a really seamless app by which if you're in a store, and let's just pick one, let's just say you're in Macy's and you have great customer service by a retail sales rep. The idea that you could press one button and immediately in a spin wheel see the faces and names of everybody who worked in Macy's who had a profile. You could very quickly select that individual, give them a 5-star rating, say that your sales clerk was knowledgeable about the clothes, had an extremely upbeat attitude, whatever it was, whatever nuanced message you wanted to send about how great they were, that could then be captured as a part of their permanent work record. And that sales clerk on the Macy's floor has the same ability to build a resume and a portfolio full of their great work, just like you and I experience. And it's that simple.
Wow, that's awesome. And I feel like I've seen this either on a sitcom or a comedy sketch, but it's very much like Human Yelp, where you're reviewing, instead of a restaurant or a store, you're reviewing actual human beings in their performance at work.
Yes, it is. And I'm a little cautious on that expression about human beings for Yelp because there's a sort of an implied that it's like a likability score. And I want to be super clear that we are really about accentuating the positive. This is an opportunity for you to recognize great performance and good deeds in the workplace. It's not a likability score or an opportunity for human beings to say bad things about people that they don't like. In fact, we've got a lot of safety mechanisms built in so that very thing doesn't happen. It's really about capturing the enthusiasm at that moment when you have a great customer experience. I'll give you an example. I went into a Home Depot store in 2017, and I had a gentleman wait on me. His name was Frank. And I was really fortunate to get Frank because, to be honest with you, just full disclosure, I'm not especially handy, But I had a list of all these action items that I needed to go take care of, including removing a red wine stain from a limestone floor, touching up a piece of antique
Well, it
furniture.
sounds like a party over there, Mark. All right.
I'm sorry, I digress. That may be too much information, but the point being that I was in over my head, and I had this guy Frank wait on me at the Home Depot location on Lemon Avenue in Dallas, Texas, and he went so out of his way over the course of an hour and 15 minutes. He walked me up and down the aisles. He gave me not only the products that I needed to perform these tasks, but he took the time to give me instructions on how to do all these things. And I have to tell you, when I checked out, I was just so excited about the great service that I had received. I made a beeline for that elevated manager's stand they have at Home Depot just to let the manager know. I just want to tell him this guy's unbelievable. And for the rest of my life, I'll never go to a Lowe's. I'll be a Home Depot man forever. When I got to the counter, the gentleman that waited on me kind of just gave me lip service. He said, "Oh, yeah, I'm not the manager. Frank's great. I'll be sure and pass it along. Have a nice day." I realized that the praise that I had delivered around Frank was never going to do anything good for him. And as I got to my car, I also realized that, shoot, I wish I'd made a connection with Frank, because I'd like to have the benefit of his expertise time and time again when I go back. And listen, I'm a serial entrepreneur, but also a 3-time chief marketing officer at many big tech companies. And so I knew what that missed connection was worth in terms of a customer experience benefit for Home Depot and other organizations. And that's really what set me on this path, was that the employees were not getting the documented recognition they deserved to forward their careers, but businesses lacked the ability to harvest data on these very important brand ambassadors, these last mile employees that make or break how we feel about a business. Yet when I went back and did the research, there were zero, and I want to stress, zero tools to be able to harvest on an individual employee basis any kind of analytics or performance metrics on how customers feel about their experience.
So, Mark, the app launches today, but tell me about the beta testing process. How has that worked so far?
Yes. So we just started crawling out with our beta testing, and we've done a fair amount of field testing on usability with individuals. And there's some pretty cool new features. In fact, one right around the corner that's going to be super neat in the next a week to 10 days, where you'll be able to press a button, and not only will it take your resume and publish it into a PDF that you could circulate if you're looking at a new job, but it'll take all your gratas, which are all those 5-star comments you got from customers, and publish them in an addendum. So imagine this: if you were a bartender and you were looking at a new job, you could not only show your prospective employer your resume of where you've worked, but then you could flip over to a page 2 and it would have a list of customer names, 5-star ratings, and all the great things they said about you, right? So really, you have, in essence, customer references to go with you. So we started doing all this testing. Terrific feedback. A lion's share of what we're doing now is we're working with a lot of large organizations who see the value, large enterprises, big box stores, and others who want to deploy Grata, not only so they can tell their employees that they matter and they want to be a part of their professional development, but quite frankly, they want that data and analytics on those last mile folks to see how they're performing. COVID has changed everything, especially for retailers. The mere definition of the word service has been tossed in the air. I talk to my CMO peers who tell me that net promoter scores, or NPS as they're called, they're out the window. It's now a net people score. And with no touch, low touch, but decidedly less interaction between customers and employees, it's imperative that organizations make the most of every one of those. And currently they sit on zero data to do that analysis. And so I think what we're spending a lot of time now working through those metrics with our beta site test companies who are anxious to deploy.
This sounds pretty cool in theory, but let me play devil's advocate. What if I'm one of these workers that, is either at a Walmart or a Costco, and they're afraid of maybe getting a bad review because they had a run-in with somebody who was being difficult?
Two things, and this is a really important differentiator, and it also, by the way, goes to that comment around Yelp for people, which I steer clear of. First of all, to use Grata, you have to authenticate with your real face and name. So if Mark is going to give a Grata to Joe, I'm doing so in the public sphere under my real ID. That alone sort of ensures that for the most part, I'm only going to be doing positive reviews. Most of us don't want to go into the town square and stand on a pillar and complain about another human being. It happens, and it should happen if you have a really bad experience. But I think there's a natural filtering that is predominantly going to be used for praise and acknowledgement of good work. I think a poor score is one where you don't have a lot of gratis. It means you're not engaging. So I think for the most part, you don't have that to fear. Now, if I gave you a grad, and we have a really interesting 1 to 5 score, it's not actually numbers, it's iconography that runs the gamut from a, oh, well, as in could have done better, all the way up to a fantastic. Now, your score is your score. So if I gave you a 3, equivalent, that goes into your average score. But any comments that I made about you, you have full editing capability as to whether or not you want to display those. So just like you and I can edit out comments and certain pieces of content from our profile on LinkedIn, if you were an employee at Lowe's or Home Depot, you'd have the same option as it relates to what you want to publish and show the public or not.
Okay. And we sort of touched upon it earlier, but is there an element where you can actually tip someone through the Grata app?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, much like that Uber exit experience, it's rating, say something nice, optional tip. So what we do currently is anybody that fills out a profile has the ability to put in their Venmo or PayPal digits, and we actually can activate direct tipping. Now we jump out of the app. We'll have a fully integrated ACH to ACH in another month. But absolutely, that is step 3. So in that example of Frank, who spent an hour and 15 minutes with me, not only would I have gladly given him a 5-star rating and said something nice because I was enthusiastic about the service, he saved me a lot of money. I would have gladly sent him $20 as a tip and loved to have had the connection so that next time I went to Home Depot with another project, God forbid, above my capabilities again, that I have the ability to ping Frank and say, hey, are you working today by chance from 3 to 6? I got another project I'm working on. I'd love to get your feedback. Again, that ability to connect with the people that have served us well, that's part of the utility as a user. And I think tipping as a component we now provide an opportunity to do that in a very frictionless way. If I may, I'll tell you one very short story because I think this will drive home for you the experience. I have a barista at Starbucks that has waited on me for a long time. And recently I waited in line and I got my drink and I got back in the car and I realized that I wanted to do something nice. So I went back in the store and I stood in line. And I got back up to the counter and she waited on me again and she says, oh, you're back. And I said, you know what? I just wanted to tell you, you do such a great job. And I put a few dollars in her tip jar. The fact that I took the time to get back in line and recognize her for her hard work, she started crying. Now, I felt terrible because I'm sure that the people in line behind me were thinking, who is the old guy that made the young girl cry, right?
Right.
My intentions were to uplift. And of course, I'm feeling really, really small. And she says, you know what? You doing that, I can't tell you how much that matters to me. I don't work here because I make a ton of money. I work here because I love people. I love being a part of their day, and I love bringing some sunshine and kicking their day off right. And that's why I do what I do. And I have to tell you, to have a frictionless way to do that without standing in line, to just say, hey, you did a great job and here's a couple of bucks and say something nice to another human being, I will tell you, it is infectious. It is absolutely infectious. The rest of that day, I am certain that I grossly overtipped at the lunch with my team. I know that I was kinder and gentler throughout the next 24 hours. It is infectious when you bring joy to another human being, and the fact that it not only is good for the soul, but it makes great business sense for both the individual employee and the organization is why I'm so optimistic that you're going to find this on your phone and you're going to be using it again and again because it feels good to connect with people who treat you right, and it feels good to give them the praise and recognition that they deserve.
And one of the reasons I love this too is because I, like you, will go out of my way to try to tip someone, especially if they're doing a service that's something I can't handle. You mentioned the hardware thing. The other day, I hired somebody to hang photos because I'm like you, Mark. I don't have wine stains all over the place, but I have like photo frames all over the house that I can't hang myself. That feeling of being able to make the tipping process easier, I think to me is a big draw for someone like myself who's like, I want to show some sort of appreciation, but the whole thing of, some people like, oh, you have that awkward exchange of like, oh, no, thank you, that kind of thing. I just love the idea that I could just do it without having to, add any discomfort to the dynamic of the relationship.
Yeah. And also too, one other friction point that we remove is when you send that grata in the app and say something nice about that employee, there's an optional button in there that's default clicked, which says share with my manager. So we send all of those comments to a deadhead email box for every organization.
Wow.
So that Starbucks manager can go in and actually get alerts that said, hey, your barista, Rebecca, just got a 5-star grata from your customer, Mr. Bunting, and he tipped her $3. Now the manager can reinforce and walk over and say to that employee, hey, I just saw that you got a 5-star grata. Great job. Hey, team, did you see what Rebecca just did? Again, this idea of having the data to reinforce is super impactful impactful. And there's many people that just don't want to get out of their car and walk inside and say something nice to somebody's face and put the dollars in the tip jar. And so, again, to have a seamless, easy way to do that, we've also now removed the friction from raising your hand and saying, could I speak to your manager?
Right. No, I love that. That's great. Honestly, I love entrepreneurs because they think of things that probably should exist that don't exist. So, how did you stumble upon this app? I mean, was it something that, because you as a serial entrepreneur been very successful, why was this the one? Because the one thing I've learned from speaking to entrepreneurs, they constantly have ideas. So, why was this the one where you were like, hate to use one of these cliche terms, why was this the one you wanted to put all your eggs into the basket?
Well, I got to be honest with you, Joe. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. This was sort of perfect storm material. My background is around entrepreneurship, but also with a strong practice in technology. And I even teach both entrepreneurship and technology marketing at the University of Texas at Austin one day a week. And so, and entrepreneurship is just my thing, and it's the intersection where I reside. This was perfect for a couple of reasons. First of all, as I mentioned to you, when I walked out of that Home Depot and got back in my car, my CMO buttons went off, and I realized that from a customer engagement standpoint, that this was a huge opportunity. Many of my peers, myself included, have even our compensation tied to certain KPIs like customer satisfaction or top line sales growth, et cetera. And so I knew this was a tool that could actually push performance and actually sell more and drive top end. That was one side. The other side is I knew on the human capital component that if we could cut down on turnover, that retention benefit was off the charts. And ironically, according to syndicated research, 1 in 5 of your top CSRs, customer service reps, will leave in the next 12 months. And ironically, it's not over compensation. It's not even over a conflict with a supervisor. 20% of them will turn over because they don't feel appreciated. So I realized that there was a cost savings component, there was a top line component. And quite frankly, when you put those two together, and I started researching, and I found out there was zero data on last mile customer facing employees, I knew that we had a data gap that was off the charts. But I will tell you what touched my heart was when I really started to understand the fact that, again, there were 79 or 80 million, depending on which research you look at, 80 million according to the US Department of Labor statistics, of these hourly employees that don't have a LinkedIn-like opportunity. And it's just fundamentally unfair. And by the way, it was not created in a response to COVID. The experience happened in 2017. I went off to be the chief marketing officer at Rackspace for a couple of years. I left in July a year ago, and I've been working on this around the clock for the last 13, 14 months trying to get ready for launch. But what really got me inspired was the fact that, again, we had the largest portion of our workforce not getting the recognition they deserve. I would like to tell you that at 30, I had that same appreciation, that I was causal. I'd like to tell you I had it at 40. Mm-hmm. At 50, I have it. And quite frankly, I know that we can move the needle. And while most of the people listening to this podcast will not live or die by a $5,000 or $7,000 a year annual raise, the gentleman at Home Depot who did such a great job, who had no way to memorialize his work, not having those tools in his annual review where he might get that $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 raise, it impacts his life. And so I knew we could use data to fundamentally shift the balance of power in a much more fundamentally fair way for those hardworking people. And all COVID did was put massive wind in our sails, because now all of a sudden every corporation is scrambling to show their frontline people that they care. So there's pressure in the public sphere, but also, quite frankly, many of those companies genuinely care and want to do right by those people. And COVID has taught us just how precious these human beings are that bag our groceries and deliver our food. And it's about time we started to show them.
It's kind of a crazy world we live in, obviously, kind of the understatement of the century. But the fact that people that work in grocery stores and hardware stores, they have become frontline workers. If you told someone 6 months ago that our grocery workers, the person who stocks the shelves, would be putting themselves in danger, you'd be like, what is that, a sci-fi movie? It's crazy. And the fact that you've been developing this over the last year or so to sort of be, as an entrepreneur, does that give you some sort of like super extra goose pimple kind of feeling that you're like, wow, I was ahead of this. Like, this is something that could really change the way people either work or communicate and live nowadays.
Yeah. Listen, I have to tell you, I'm psyched about it to begin with, and it's not been without its twists and turns. To be honest with you, I was going live in 110 restaurants with our beta test on April 15th. So for a matter of a few weeks, I thought I had quite possibly the dumbest idea at the worst time in history. And so it was only on the backside did we realize that, at least from the standpoint of the value of the technology, that COVID had fundamentally changed the landscape in a way that was highly additive to what we were building, and that there was really a unique fit. I don't go anywhere where I have challenges about the technology, the application as developed, or the need. This is all going to be about implementation and execution. And so as an entrepreneur, if I can take that much risk out of the line, that gets me super pumped. But again, I have to tell you, while I love the B2B side, and I think that we're going to serve some corporate customers with data to help them improve their performance, what drives me 14 hours a day is the idea that we can impact 80 million lives. And by the way, provide a wonderful service to those of us who use the app, who can connect with those people that'll give us great service again and again. So if you can find the flaw in praising and acknowledging other human beings and improving business, as well as improving your own ability to get the kind of service that you deserve, and you can get all that for free, I'd love to hear what the downside is.
Nah, I love it. I love it. Before I let you go, because I like to always check in with, serial entrepreneurs to kind of help the new entrepreneurs that are, being born every day now. It seems to me, obviously we've talked about this COVID world, but on top of that, this new digital world. Tell me what you tell young entrepreneurs now about, what kind of advice can you give them? Because I feel like being an entrepreneur now is very different than it was, say, 20 years ago when you started. What would you say to a young entrepreneur today?
Well, I'll just tell you, I say a lot to a lot of them because I have over 300 of them that I teach each week, and then I mentor many more down at the Capital Factory Accelerator and others. I think as much as the landscape has changed in a digital environment, as much as there's now almost basically unlimited capital access, I fundamentally believe that the rules have not changed that much. It's about character. It's about finding that idea that you are passionate about. And I think passion gets just grossly underplayed. I know it was a hot idea for a long time, but I've never been successful at things that I didn't have a core enthusiasm for above and beyond just building the business and making money. There had to be something else. So the most successful entrepreneurs I know are solving what turn out to be very big problems with what I'll call very simple observations. They learn to turn the door handle to the left instead of the right. It's these gaps that they have the ability to recognize. And then it gets down to the character and the commitment to see those things through. And so I love to tell you that I have this magic bullet for entrepreneurs based on a lot of new learnings in this digital environment they're learning. For me, it's back to basics. Pick the right partner. Have high integrity, stay committed to the outcome, and treat people fairly. And then, of course, the ultimate is, of course, the flexibility to pivot, because any entrepreneur, all of them that have been successful, know that they go through a number of iterations before they find the appropriate path. And if there's one lesson for young people, it's don't be too locked in to what you think your product looks like today. It will change as you travel down the road. I think most of those are sort of timeless. Whether we're talking about 2020 or 2010, I think those fundamental rules are pretty much the same.
His name is Mark Bunting. He is the founder and CEO of Grata. Mark, I know it's a big day. It's launch day for Grata, so I just want to thank you for the time, and I wish you the best of luck.
Joe, I really appreciate it. Enjoyed the visit today, and best of luck to you too, my friend.
That's it for this edition of Forbes Books Radio. You can subscribe to Forbes Books Radio on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget the golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.
This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio. Find out more at ForbesBooksRadio.com.